Hello, creative people, designer. Today, Freddie and Shady, we have our guest Anson Chan coming to see us. He's originally an architect from Hong Kong. He has been involved in Shenzhen in the past year more and more often thanks to the renovation of Nantou area. He's a strategic planner. He has his company in Shanghai. Anson, welcome to the show. Please, I'll let you introduce briefly to our audience.
Okay, my first show dedicated to you guys.
Sure. It's an honor. It's an honor.
Okay, so maybe I have a very brief introduction of myself. As you said, I am from Hong Kong. I study and I work as an architect in Hong Kong for around 5 to 8 years. And after that, I have a chance to, because by that time, after 1997, Hong Kong's real estate is not very booming. So architectural firms, they have many jobs in China.
Right.
So I need to take care some jobs in China. So I travel on two sides. By around 2003, I decided I need to move my focus to China. So I spent 3 years, 1 year stationed in Beijing, 1 year in Shanghai, and 1 year in Guangzhou. They're totally different. I want to feel the way of doing things, their culture, and which city I like to stay.
So it was your plan to on purpose try and check
Both.
them out?
Always the consultant firms, they are different from the projects.
Right.
Incidentally, 1 year I have some jobs in Beijing and in Shenzhen, in Guangzhou and Shanghai. So I can live in these cities a little bit longer to know more about their culture. Eventually, I select Shanghai because by that time, Shanghai is quite close to Hong Kong. I mean, in terms of the people that I met, the way they're doing things, the way they the lifestyle, the way they treat the contracts or their promise, etc., etc. They're quite close to Hong Kong.
All right.
So I select to go to Shanghai. By that time, I still have my own design company, and again, accidentally, I find a shop right next to Xintiandi. Which I want to move my design studio in, but it is too big, so I create. I think it's one of the first integrated shops with coffee, with design books, and some some design-oriented stuffs to sell. Those I brought it from Europe and from Japan, and also the books. So I start this little complex by that time, starting from 2003 to 2005. Then I was selected by my boss, which is the boss of the Bridge 8, one of the first creative cluster in Shanghai, in China. And he persuaded me to give up everything and join his company.
All right.
So by that time, I start to change my role from originally architectural and interior design, then to design management, then strategic planning. Then I have a chance to become a GM of some projects. By that time, my leasing manager suddenly resigned. I need to take care of her job,
Take
then
over.
I take over the job, and I tried leasing and operation. And eventually, during that 10 years, I can have chance to move to different departments to basically know everything about that industry. And 3 years before, I am almost 50, and I think I want to start my own business. So I quit that team and started my business in Shanghai. And last year, I'm so lucky. I have a chance to get that project from Wanke, and then I start to spend right now 50% of my time station in Shenzhen, to take care of the Nantou City renovation projects.
Right. It's quite interesting how Shenzhen, despite being such a new and young city, we are already dealing, fortunately, with the value of the pre-existence. Myself, I've been here also 10 years. I've seen how literally 90% of pre-existence was torn down to give space to skyscrapers, new development, towers, infrastructure.
Yeah.
But I think Shenzhen probably also, I don't know, because of the process of the Biennale, because of some local projects that have been successful, like City Loft and so on. I think that Shenzhen, compared to other cities, started to give a lot of value to maintain that little historical, if we can call it so, pre-existence that they have. And Nantou, I guess, is one of the main examples. Also because one part of Nantou is very old, right?
Yes. I think because of the history of Shenzhen, it's very new. They just started some 40 years before, compared with other cities. Say in Shanghai, you can easily find a building of 100 years, 200 years, or even older. So, and also the people in Shenzhen is very young.
Right.
Most of them come from other cities. They are some 20s or 30s. The population is young, the city is young, and the hardware also, mainly, they are very young. So just like Nantou City and other two Asian cities in Shenzhen rural area, there are very, very few. And also, I think maybe because of recent years, some cities started to have some successful projects, not necessarily torn down everything and rebuild, can make the business model sustainable.
Okay.
Then some developers, some governments start to think about it. Especially there are some projects, very sensitive, very complicated ownership, or lots of factors, making it impossible to turn down and rebuild. So if you don't have a new strategy to revitalize it, so basically you need to leave it there for another 20 years.
You get stuck into the...
Yes.
That,
and before that, government and developer, they are very simple. Buy, turn down, build.
Right.
If cannot buy, okay, next one.
They just move on to the next.
Because when they calculate, if I rent it for certain years, I only can get the added value of the rents. Compared with the investment return is very low, etc., etc. But right now, the real estate is coming more and more stable. There's not extra very 30%, 50% profits when you invest real estate. So they start to calm down and think about, we may do this. It's because by doing this, it's quite socially, it has some value. The government will support it instead of just build some residential house. And strategically, some big groups, say one group that I'm serving, in the whole national strategies, they need this kind of projects. So they do not value whether they do it or not purely on commercial, but whether they can earn or how much they can earn. So we have some chance to do this.
But I guess it's also on some sides, it's also, let's say, safer, because even though, of course, maybe the added value or return investment might be lower, but if you look then at the single units and the social value, it works on the quantities. Like these areas at the end, are hosting a lot of people. There's a lot of single units that individually making a big cluster of over thousands of people. And I assume that I'm happy to see that, especially in Shenzhen, from the government side, the policies of understanding the value of the local community and of this pre-existence is improving, because probably they also, understand that now, compared to 10 years ago, Shenzhen is starting having their identity, and people that have been living now here in Shenzhen, they are Shenzhen Ren. Officially, finally. I remember 10 years ago, the first time I came here, I never met anyone that was born in Shenzhen. Now I've been here 10 years. I start meeting a lot of young students on their 20s or early 30s that, of course, I didn't have the chance to meet 10 years ago. But now you know, I meet them around. And there is a lot of people that are born in Shenzhen. And this, I think, gives a very different perspective on the pre-existence of these neighborhoods and stuff.
Yes, very true. Very true.
In Hong Kong, probably you grew up somehow with a different perspective on this, because probably it is a bit more common to see the integration and the renovation of the pre-existence rather than in China. Right?
Let me tell you some examples. In Hong Kong, because the land is very limited, the land cost is very high. Right. So it's sometimes very difficult to, in a city center, to buy and torn down even one old buildings. It will cost you some billions,
right?
to torn down one buildings and rebuild. And also, the you know, Hong Kong, the buildings and the units are very small. So we get used to manipulate something in a very compacted city fabrics to do something. It's quite common in Hong Kong to do this. But the difficulty in Hong Kong is the policy is too mature. That means if you want to do one thing, you need a very, very long process compared with in China. Do you know a project in Hong Kong called PMQ?
Oh, I know very well, yes.
Okay. Before it is built, that team go to Shanghai and interview with us. By that time we already built the bridge 8 and got quite successful. And we talk about, they asked us how long will it take if you get a job, a warehouse. We say around 9 months to 12 months, starting from design, construction, and leasing. And you will open. And they told us they even cannot get the budget approval within the 12 months.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And they need around 5 years to do the whole thing.
Well, it's the same thing like in like California where I grew up. So ever since I was a kid, they've been talking about building like a high-speed train on the coast that could take you from like Los Angeles to San Francisco and beyond in, you know, an hour or less. And this was since I was a kid. This is like, you know,
still there talking.
They're still there talking.
I remember. I see that video.
2 years.
Is it a university class that the teacher showed them in US there are a bridge. They need to build it in a few years, but in Beijing just one night.
Oh,
you know that
right.
video?
Okay, yes, I've seen it.
Oh, you never seen it?
Yeah. I've seen it.
And the bridge, because it's in very, very city center, they can only afford to block the road for one night.
Right.
They prepare everything, prefabricate and move and connect one night.
Yes.
And compare with it, that bridge in US, say 3 years or 5 years, still under construction.
Still sorting it out. No, it's crazy. Like in the few years that I've lived here in Shenzhen, like they've built so many metros, you know, lines and so many high-speed trains, you know, and I can't get one train built in, you know, 30 years, you know, in California.
But I mean, in China, we know that things are fast, but I believe Shenzhen is even faster, right? I mean, I think they call it Shenzhen speed. It's like quite
I agree.
amazing, literally.
I agree. But because I'm more familiar with Shanghai, when I come to Shenzhen and start working in the past 1 year, I feel that they need to calm down a little bit because when they are doing something fast, but the
quality
maybe I mean the quality is not the hardware quality. It's the content, the way they are doing the software part.
Right.
Especially for those areas that I'm familiar, say the creative clusters. In Shenzhen, there are lots of them. When I reviewed what they are doing, it's maybe 10 to 15 years Shanghai did that before.
Oh,
so it's
right.
very, very old-fashioned way to do it. Of course, it's good to me, so that we have chance to bring in some new things here.
Yeah. But in Nantou, for example,
Yeah.
that well, we are all familiar with that. I think also some of our audience, because of our next event there in Nantou, they will have the chance to see. That also has been quite an amazing, fast process, but I think very successful. If I remember properly, in 2017, when there was the Biennale there by Urbanus curating it, that was the first triggers of a certain renovation.
Yeah.
At that time, I think Vanke was already involved or took over later. No, okay.
No, not enough.
And now it's less than 3 years after, and we all know what is happening there.
I'll tell you a little story, the history about this version of renovation. Starting from last year, 2019, April, the government decided to do this project, and eventually they find Vanke as the suitable person to do this job, and just started last year, and the construction starts this year, April, and we take only 4.5 months to complete what you are now. You now see 4.5 months, and the most difficult part is by the time they do the construction
For the road.
in parallel, the existing citizens living in other buildings need to pass through, need to merge with the construction sites. It's totally a mess in the past few months, but they do
I
it.
can imagine. Well, we have seen it already. Now that there are still some main like side road that are still partly closed, but you can still pass through. But it's
Yeah, but by that
crazy how
time,
they can do it.
and also the site is not clear by one time because there are totally there are 330 buildings. Right now, it's already done around 50 something buildings. By that time, some of them under construction, some of them under survey, some of them still the existing shops still in operation, some
Right.
of them under negotiation with the landlord. They are not 100% confirm the contract. So it's not a one-off process.
Of
So,
course,
so some buildings are under construction, some buildings still operation, somebody living here. So it's very, very complicated by that time.
So how long do you think it's going to take to complete the whole project?
Yeah, and then next
You know?
phase 2 and phase 3.
Yeah, like till there's no more phases left besides like maintaining it and.
Hopefully next year summer. So around 7 or 8 months later, the whole thing will be
very
completed.
short. Shenzhen speed.
Crazy, super Shenzhen speed. And then there, what is the? I mean, you together with Vanke as a strategic planner, you're envisioning in terms of phases and functions how to approach the area, right?
Yes.
And then technically, Vanke would, I guess, take care of the main master plan design in terms of infrastructure, roads, and so on. And then all the single buildings that have been regenerated, is it something that you're talking with the owners and they would do it themselves? You call different architects, Vanke internally would do that. What is the process of the single final touches and details?
It's another complicated things. First of all, when I do the strategic planning of the overall 330 buildings, in parallel, Vanke, they have a subsidiary doing the architectural design.
Right.
They did one version of overall as a background. But they know that because they do 300 buildings design, they cannot take care what each of
One
them
by one, yeah.
one by one very detailed. So they have a program. They invited around 15 different architects. Half of them is famous in Asia. Half of them are very young, emerging young architects.
Interesting.
To do these individual buildings. So this is the first round. They did the overall. Second round, they find some different architects to do some strategic location buildings. And then the third round is from me, because I think one interesting thing for this project is those buildings are small and individual house. Right. And the future tenants that I want to pull in, most of them are designers, creative people, art related companies,
creative community, industry, and so on.
Myself and you guys also this kind of people. We like to own a building with our style, our design, our input,
definitely,
or part of the input from us. So this I think is one of the merit that the project may given to the tenants.
Right.
Then I start my leasing, and I need to run in parallel of their construction drawings progress. If I find tenants in time, they have the input to change the design before it is built. Of course, they hate us very much because every week I said, "Oh, okay, hold on, this
There's
building.
A new one.
Maybe the tenant want to do this, want to do that. They need to change." But I am maybe not everyone, but at least right now maybe 6 to 10 tenants we confirmed, and they will be involving in changing the original design.
Oh, all right.
The process is complicated, but I think this is the value of this one, and also make them very different. And this is the cityscape. If everything is more or less the same, it will be very fake.
Yeah, but this is also, I mean, if myself as an architect, it's very difficult to imagine that in one road I have to do 20 different buildings. I mean, of course, it is not impossible, but of course the variation wouldn't be the same. So it is a very interesting process for creating that variations.
And also, by the time they invite some famous architects or some young emerging architects, I already tell them, creative people, or if myself is an architect, I don't want to work in another architect's building if it is very stylish.
Right.
So I intentionally separate my tenants group into two parts. One is I call hardware parts. So architects, planners, interior designer, lighting, landscaping designer. I call this hardware designers. I leave an area that wait for them to come and they change the design.
Right.
Some I call software creative people. Say they do some music, advertising, drama, or
like arts and crafts.
That kind. They are more focused on content, but they are not very care about the hardware.
Right.
Or what kind of building they are working in.
Right.
So I separate into two groups and fit the purpose. Yeah,
it's true. I mean that we all know that as creators, being able to be the tenant of a building where you can physically put your signature because of your design is like a business card. So of course, I'm guessing architects and designers would like to.
Yeah. Right now, I am now approaching a graffiti company.
All right.
They may be interested, but at the same time, in the original planning, I asked Wanker's design house to leave some walls for me because I know that somebody may paint something or hang something on it. Right. So I already leave some advertising space.
Nice. Yeah. No, that's very cool. I invite all of our audience to go and have a look, especially if they have seen 6 months ago or 1 year ago what was and how it is now. Is quite amazing. When you were there with me, you were not there before, but
no, when I was there, it was my first time.
But you can imagine those areas that I bring to you outside the red line is what it was.
Yeah, it's just the urban village style. Yeah. just like what we were walking through when we saw the little individual houses.
Yeah,
and then it got transformed into something truly unique and different. For me personally, I think this is probably one of the most exciting projects I've seen develop in Shenzhen. And more exciting than like the big skyscrapers or the crazy big buildings.
It's much more difficult, man.
And I mean, they're both pretty difficult, but like, it's just
final result, like
the final result is so cool to like be able to like, you know, keep people's lives intact who've been living there, at the same time, you know, bring it, you know, new life as a cool creative space where people can work and play and eat and drink and, you know, so many other aspects, have festivals and, and what, you know, so on and so forth.
Also, there in Nantou is one of the few places where literally you can see a piece of very old ancient ruin, like the gate that was the original fortress of Dongguan, right? It was the border kind of.
How old is that arch?
The history of this ancient city is more than 1700 years.
Wow.
But those old buildings or the gates only have around 100 or 200 years before, because they very, very old things already torn down and they rebuilt. So what you can see is around 100 years, or some of them is faked or rebuilt.
Once again, I invite the audience definitely to go and see, as we already said. I'm curious if there is any similar project like this that you know of, or you can share with us, whether in Shenzhen or in Guangdong area.
Maybe most of the audience haven't been to there. I have a very simple introduction how special this project is. In China, there are lots of cities and lots of historical things or Asian cities, but most of them, they only treat them as tourism project. Right. They emphasize on how Asian the building is. Maybe they simulate some contents, some tenants, or some performance of the old things. But this time, the project, the Nantou City project, Wanke and the government don't want to do that. So eventually, in my strategic planning, we incorporate some history, cultural things. We have some creative clusters. We have some more fashionable art festival. You know, we have the art, the Fringe Festival before, and we have some pop-up stores, etc. So make it a very integrated program, because for that kind of tourism-oriented projects, the most difficult part is the high and low season is very clear. But if it is in a rural area, it may be okay. But if it is Nantou City is in city center, the opportunity cost is quite high, because this location, they should perform better, have more turnover, etc. Right. So we intentionally put different contents together, and there are very few projects in China like this. I would say it's a tourism and creative custom mixed together. And together with
local
some
community also.
Local community. The other thing I want to say is, because the whole city has 1,000 buildings, Wanke and the government only do 1/3 of them. They intentionally not to touch the whole thing. That means they expect after this 1/3 is done, it will gradually influence the other 2/3.
Trigger the renovation.
And I think this process will be very interesting to observe in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. Right.
And come back to your question, I really haven't come across to this kind of characters projects right now in China. But I am doing another one. Luckily, really lucky, because I am participating in this Nantou City project, and it's started some awareness of the market, and I have a chance to do another Wanke's project in Dongguan. Similar city center has an old street, has very strong historical background, and Dongguan has another different thing is they have their own core industry before the garment, and some electronics before, but it's going down. And I am now picking up those things and try to add something and living up them. So that project is more not only a tourism and not only a creative cluster, but also I will do something to help enhancing their core industry.
Right.
Maybe coming out in the next 2 years.
Well, so the project, the Dongguan project hasn't started yet. It's more about planning.
Right now, I am doing strategic planning.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then, like in 2 or 3 years, you'll actually start
hopefully.
doing construction.
And that one is another model because we have something we need to preserve. And besides, one could have some lands they can build and sell residential towers.
Oh, so they can combine the
So
new
they can-
development
They can
with
balance the investment. It's different from Nantou City. Nantou City, they don't have any other square meter
possibility
to
of
sell. So it's very difficult for Nantou City.
But I think it's, I mean, in terms of promotion and showcase, even for a giant like Vanke, I think it's very important to basically put in front of the face of the government and the authorities, let's say, the value and the result of an operation like this. And not only is happening so fast, but I think that already in 2, 3, maybe maximum 5 years, you will already be able to see the results in the sense of what triggered, like you said, in the surrounding and so on. And in a so fast developing country like China, this become literally like a strategy that can be scalable to any first, second, third tier cities, especially when we look now at the, not only, it's not called anymore Pearl River Delta, the greater Bay Area, GBA, where it will be like a big city around the Delta. It's going to be super important to have some developments so strategic that the local community is put at the center of the development, because otherwise people will be
Of course, during this process, I should admit that we kick away some existing tenants or the village, people living in the village before. But from the city's point of view, I think historically this is quite a mess and high density, poor living conditions. After we inject some new investment or new contents to it, from the city point of view, this location may not suitable for them to exist anymore. So we squeeze out some of these to other place. I should admit that. To them, to have a project, we cannot favor all parties.
Well, of course.
But overall, I think it's a positive one.
Yeah. Well, we are going to be very curious to see the outcome, and hopefully we will have a chance to discuss more about the future developments and opportunities. We are going to see each other very often, also thanks to some events for the creative community that we are going to start organizing in Nantou. So thanks, Anson, for your time today.
I have one final question. So you're involved in kind of like the big picture process in these projects. Do you ever miss where you came from and doing design?
Okay. Lots of people ask me this question. I am still doing design, but I am not drawing anymore to compete what I want. I would say I am designing the space. What's the character of the space? What is the actor in the space? What is the audience in the space?
Right.
More like I design the place, but not by the drawings.
More like by the content.
Yes, and I, in different positions, and I drive this matter to happen. From planning, just like preparing a movie. I have the the script first, and then I have to find the investor, find the actors, and also the hardware, the producer. But eventually, it's the audience to say whether this film is good or not.
Right.
Yeah. So I put this together and eventually deliver to the audience. That is the consumers, whether they come or not, whether it's successful or not. So I am not the actor. I am not the one to do the how should I say the
facades,
the facade, the background, everything.
The renovation.
But I am driving this happen. But it's so complicated that I am not a developer and I cannot do it by myself. But I drive these things to one direction. I should say right now, of course, Wanke is a very good client. Almost 80 to 90% of the things that I think and I want to do, they agree and put forward. So I think I like this project very much because what I think can 80 to 90% present it out eventually.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good to have that kind of trust, and I think that there is no way that all the parties involved would be able to achieve the same thing without the visionary man like you behind the thing to pulling the string and keeping all together, because it's also probably difficult to have a single overview. You need to know a little bit of everything, right, of what is going on in different things, and managing this.
I remember when they first of all encountered me, the GM said that, I got this project, it's so headache, I don't know how to do it, and I consult other departments. The commercial department said that it cannot work, and the creative cluster department said it cannot work. And but I really want to work it out. Can you help? So I started to be employed, and 1 year later, when we talk about this, luckily 1 year before we met together and then give them the directions, and they right now feel very comfortable, and they see what they will going to do in the next 2 or 3 years comfortably. And also she proved to the other departments that you're wrong, or you cannot imagine what we are now doing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice. Thanks for sharing all your experience and vision. We will talk again.
And welcome you
soon.
and the audience to come and take a look.
Yeah, we will.
It's an amazing project.
We were very lucky to be there with Anson and introduced us personally, all the story and different things. But as we were saying, we will organize some events in Nantou. Anson himself also is organizing a lot of events there. So there's going to be chances to get more deep experience of the place. So thanks a lot for being here and for your time. And thanks for the listeners and the audience to be with us. Of course, support us by liking and following our channel. And we will talk to you guys next time.
We're out.